this. Yeah. I like this. Yeah. I like this. Yeah. I like this.
So let's talk about this lady boy, Canelo Alvarez. So Mexican-Irish or Irish-Mexican Canelo Alvarez is actually considered a boxing fraud for most Mexican people. Yeah, you're shocked, right? No, I'm telling you the truth. If you go to any real Mexican, I'm talking real Mexican boxing fans, okay? And if you go to any forum, you can go to Facebook, you can go wherever you want. Most of them, I would say 80% of them, consider Canelo Alvarez to be a fraud. They think all his fights are a circus show. That's what they say. And he gets a lot of hate in Mexico. Only people from Guadalajara kind of give him some credit, but if you go outside from Guadalajara, he gets a lot of hate. The only people supporting Canelo Alvarez, this is the interesting part, are the Latino Americans, which call themselves Mexican Americans, but they're really just gringos. That's all they are. They're the ones supporting Canelo Alvarez, and they love Canelo Alvarez because they see boxing as a racial war. They think that, you know, this is like blood in and blood out, you know, where, you know, they have to defend Miklo, you know, Miklo, the white guy, and you're the guys backing him up, because they have standards, and Canelo Alvarez is like the peak of the crop, right? Because he's white. That's what everybody wants to be in the Latino community. They want to be a white guy, right? So Canelo Alvarez reflects that whiteness in the Latino community. But it's interesting because they claim that, you know, they love Mexican fighters, but when it's Jose Cepeda, when it's boxers like, for example, Jose Ramirez, David Benavidez, which is I mean he's kind of mixed, but he's Ecuadorian and, you know, Mexican or whatever. They don't support him. They're not supporting Diego Pacheco, and Diego Pacheco is doing a great job. He's from East LA, if I'm not mistaken. They don't support him because they look more indigenous, and the more indigenous you look, you're on the darker side of things, and you don't get the same support. So Canelo gets that sort of support in the same way as Ryan Garcia. But Canelo Alvarez's career has been one of the biggest frauds I've ever seen in the sport of boxing, because I watched boxing for a long time, and I can almost guarantee you that Canelo Alvarez would have ducked a lot of the good middleweights that were in the 90s and 80s, because if he can't even fight boxers like Demetrius Andrade, which is a very complicated fight, he ducked him in 154 and 160 pounds. If he's ducking, I mean, he ducked Dave Morrow Jr. too. I mean, if you say David Benavidez, you got to include Dave Morrow Jr. The media doesn't want to say that because obviously they're not stupid. They don't want to say, well, he also ducked a Cuban. They're protecting him once again. But in reality, not only does this guy give rehydration clauses to his opponents, but also when he started his career, if he would have started his career in the United States of America, he would have got his ass whooped, because we have much better quality of opposition, especially in the lower ranks, the scrub level. And he tied with Rocky Juarez, who had a terrible record. I mean, if you would have talked with Rocky Juarez, he, like I said, and if he would have fought American opposition, he would have never made it to the next level. He would have had a few losses already. But Oscar de la Hoya, which takes advantage of Mexican fighters, he saw that he was whiter, and he said, you know, I can take this guy to the next level because America needs a new white superstar. And that's how I always saw it. And in reality, Triple G was the same way too. He was also a renowned duck and a pussy. He ducked other fighters too as well. But the media was trying to hide that away because they were trying to make new superstars in the sport of boxing, trying to make the Europeans and especially the Central Europeans, just the Kazakhs and the Uzbeks, they were trying to make him look like they were a new level. But Triple G was a renowned pussy. I mean, he was basically ducking fights, and he literally ducked so many fights, making Kell Brook go 2 weight classes, but he couldn't go 1 weight class to fight Andre Ward. And then, and then he couldn't unify Andre. I mean, the guy was a pussy, right? But Canelo was and Golovkin were kind of media creations. And to some extent, let's be honest, this was kind of started to some extent for Floyd Mayweather Jr. He started this. And, a lot of fighters now want to be basically, perfect. And they want to have a perfect record. And this kind of destroyed the sport of boxing. But Gervonta Davis is the same creature, also taking easy ass fights, trying not to unify with Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson. So anything that opposes his style, he just ducks them. But in the case of Canelo Alvarez would have ducked a lot of the fighters in Triple G too, in the 90s and the 80s. Fighters, like Julio Cesar Green, Carl Daniels, John David Jackson, Reggie Johnson, Steve Collins, Terry Norris, Keith Holmes, that would have been another one, Otis Grant, never mind like Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones, what's his name? What's this guy's name? Gerald McQuillan, he would have ducked him too. James Toney, he would have ducked him too. Terry Norris. There would have been so many fighters that this guy would have ducked that it wouldn't be surprised. But if he would have fought in the 90s or the 80s, Go-Go Girl and Canelo Alvarez would have been exposed for the frauds they really are. Because they're okay, but they're nothing special. They wouldn't be able to duck the American talent that we had back then. And even like fighters like like Jermaine Taylor, who beat Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins was the best middleweight, and after that, it's all been kind of like frauds, to be honest with you. So, and I'm not talking about Andre Ward, because Canelo would have ducked Andre Ward too. He wanted to get him out of retirement, once again showing he's a fraud. But Canelo's always been a fraud, man. Canelo's always been a fraud and a fraudster. Now at 160, I think that he showed more skills, especially in head movement. But now that he went up, he reminds me of Mikey Garcia when he went up against Errol Spence Jr. Not a lot of head movement, just mostly high guard, come in, get in the inside and just try to throw your shots. He does have some skills. I mean, he's a good fighter, but I don't think he's nothing that we haven't seen in the sport of boxing, especially if you followed it for a long time. So, in my opinion, Canelo Alvarez is a fraud. And I want Terence Crawford to beat his ass. Because I'll tell you one thing. If Canelo loses to Terence Crawford, you can count that as being the biggest humiliation the country of Mexico has ever faced in boxing. This will be the biggest humiliation in Mexican boxing history if he fights Terence Crawford and loses. Even if it's a close fight, it will still look really, really bad. So Canelo's going to have to knock him out. But if he doesn't knock him out and he gets outboxed and he loses, even ICE will go and deport him out of Mexico. So, in my opinion, he's really playing with fire here. And Terence Crawford is a much more skilled fighter, much more skilled boxer. And he has all the tools to beat Canelo Alvarez. But let's be honest here about the power of Canelo Alvarez, because there's something weird with this man. I mean, you have this great head movement and you show this power and strength against Billy Joe Saunders. And I think this guy is the age of 34 or 33, but he looks much slower now. He looked good against Caleb Plant. That was a good fight. But other than that, it looks like he got older fast. Like, you look at his body, and he looks like an old Joe Louis when he fights. He just looks slow. And there's something really off about that. And I don't know if this is related with doping or not, but isn't it strange that the entire stable or the trainers, the fighters that train with Eddie Reynoso, 7 of them tested positive, one of them being Canelo Alvarez? Isn't that a little bizarre? So you got this guy who moves up to 168 pounds, who wasn't necessarily knocking everybody out in 154 pounds and 160 pounds. But then he starts just to knock these people out like crazy and becomes undisputed. I even question his undisputed championship that was gifted. The WBA and the WBC were being fought for when he fought against Callum Smith. They already gave him the belt. You can check The Athletic, which is the New York Times sports newspaper. I think they're related with the New York Times. But it clearly says that he requested the fight for Aldi Gildrim. It was an order, so he asked for the fight. The belt was already given to him. So that's not a good way to become undisputed. But in fact, I don't even consider that to be undisputed, because the WBC could have, even though, David Benavidez was suspended, they could have made it a recess champion like they've done with other fighters too. So if they gave a pass to Oscar Valdez, for drinking a little tea, then they could have probably done it with David. But anyway, but I think his career has been a fraud, bro. And Chael Sonnen was basically admitting that he was testing positive, but he was a drug cheat, and he said that Canelo Alvarez was a drug cheat. And I can believe it. I can definitely believe it, because he looks slow. The dude does not. It's like he aged really fast. And if you take a lot of steroids, you're gonna age faster. That is a fact. So I don't know what's up with this man, but in his last fights, he just looks really slow. His hair kind of looks like it's falling, it's thinning out. Just something bizarre about it, man. There's just something that it's not right. It's something that's not right. There's something that's just not right with him. But he definitely lost his power, and that's not something that you lose. You're knocking out, fighters, like flies, and then you get to Jaime Munguia Berlanga, who he should have easily knocked out. Jaime Munguia was basically a bum. He basically ducked everybody just like Berlanga did. You could have knocked John Ryder out. Very bizarre. He couldn't. William Skull, I understand that he has a different style of boxing. It's called boxing backwards. I thought William Skull won that fight, but I knew they were going to give it to Canelo anyway. But it's a little bizarre, isn't it, that he wasn't able to knock out all these fighters. And then the head trainer, Reynoso, has 10 fighters who were under him or close to him that tested positive. And Robert Garcia said in one of his interviews that he checks all the meals and the plans with a nutritionist with all his fighters. So he pretty much said that Reynoso knew what was going on. All right. Even David Benavidez has said the same thing, who gets a lot of hate from the people that say they love him, which are, like I said, they're not real Mexicans. They're Latinos who don't have a identity. They want to be something that they're not. Not even the real Mexicans consider them Mexicans. They call them pochos. That's what they call them. But they're just Americans. That's all they are. But it's really interesting. So I hope this fight with Terence Crawford, I hope he beats that fraud, that scam, the ginger ale. I hope he beats the shit out of him. I really do hope that Crawford does become undisputed in that weight class, because beating Canelo Alvarez will only show how much more in the United States, like how great we are as far as boxing is concerned. We're a different level, and it's not even close. But this would just solidify already what we already knew about United States. We just have the best boxing on the planet, and we've shown it already with Shakur Stevenson against Cepeda, another ducker who was basically not taking good fights coming up as he was moving up in weight class. We just show it once and once again that we're the best. And I think that will be great for Terence Crawford, but I do feel bad for the real Mexicans in Mexico, because fighters like Canelo are really being pushed by Latinos in America, aka Mexican Americans. They're the ones who are pushing this guy, this fraud, because they believe, that boxing is like blood in, blood out. Like, Canelo's like Miklo, and once again, it's the white guy with the authority, and they have to follow him. And and it's sad. But real Mexican people, they don't like him, and he's gonna really, really fuck up boxing in Mexico if he loses that fight. So that's what I have. But I will say this: if you call yourself a Mexican American, well, Canelo is Irish Mexican then, because you're either from one country or you're not. You're either with us or you're not. I respect Mexico for being with Mexicans, but they don't even believe that you're a true Mexican. So if you're not don't give me that shit of Mexican American. You're either from the United States or you're not. And if you're not, just don't say Mexican American. Just say you're from Mexico, and that's it. That's my point. All right, give us a like, subscribe, and become part of our community here in Golden Out Boxing USA. And for more videos, check us out. We also have a Spanish channel, Golden Out Boxing, where you can also appreciate our boxing in Spanish as well. And we're pro boxing here. We don't go with that ethnicity shit, but I always want American fighters to do well, and I hope Terence Crawford beats that piece of shit. All right, we'll talk to you later. Peace out.